After her tech millionaire son's sudden death, Eleanor Wright discovers his perfect wife isn't grieving but plotting. Finally, I can put that old woman in a home and be free of this burden. As deadly accidents begin to follow Eleanor through Silicon Valley's corporate maze, she must uncover the truth behind her son's death before becoming the next victim of a conspiracy hiding in plain sight. Before we begin, write in the comments where you're listening to our stories from. Subscribe to our channel. It's free and you can always change your mind. Enjoy the story. Chapter 1. The Fall. Losing a child is the most devastating pain a parent can experience, but when that grief becomes entangled with betrayal and deception, it transforms into something far more dangerous. My name is Eleanor Wright, and my world shattered the day I received that phone call about my son Jason. But what I didn't know then was that his death was just the beginning of a nightmare I never saw coming. I've always been the rock in Jason's life. From the moment he was born in our small apartment in Chicago, I knew my purpose was to guide him, protect him, and be his unwavering supporter. We didn't have much. A single mother working 2 jobs rarely does. But what we lacked in wealth, we made up for in determination. Jason wasn't given any advantages in life. The neighborhoods we lived in were tough, the schools underfunded, but he had something special burning inside him, ambition. More importantly, he had me. I was his constant, his biggest cheerleader. When no one else believed in his dreams of building a tech company, I did. I stood beside him through every failure, every setback, every small triumph. And when he became one of Silicon Valley's most successful entrepreneurs at 32, I was there, quietly proud, watching from the sidelines as he conquered the world that had once seemed so far out of reach. But life has a cruel way of reminding us that nothing is permanent. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon in April. I was watering the plants on my porch when my phone rang. Something inside me knew before I answered. A chill ran through my body as the police officer's voice confirmed my worst fear. Jason had been in a car accident on Highway 101. The words didn't register at first. I just remember feeling cold, like the air around me had frozen solid. I wanted to scream, to run, to deny it all, but the officer's gentle voice continued, explaining details I couldn't process. My son, my brilliant, kind, unstoppable son, was gone. The world collapsed in on itself. I couldn't think. I couldn't move. How could this happen? Jason was supposed to be invincible. He was supposed to outlive me. I had always imagined I would die peacefully, knowing he was thriving, carrying on long after I was gone. But that future vanished in an instant. The funeral was held at an elegant chapel in Palo Alto. Everything felt surreal. The flowers, the photographs of Jason smiling, the hushed conversations. So many people came, business partners, employees, friends I'd never met. I walked through it all in a fog, nodding mechanically when people offered condolences, unable to truly hear or see anything around me. Until I heard her voice. Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, stood just a few feet away, talking to someone near the refreshment table. I wasn't meant to hear her, but somehow her words cut through the murmuring crowd with perfect clarity. "Finally," she said, her voice laced with contempt. "I can put that old woman in a home and live without this burden." I froze, my hand clutching my glass of water so tightly I thought it might shatter. My heart, already broken beyond repair, somehow found a new way to break. Vanessa had always been the picture of perfection, beautiful, polished, the ideal partner for a rising tech mogul. She'd been in Jason's life for 5 years, married for 3. I had welcomed her into our small family, grateful that my son had found someone to share his success with, someone who made him happy. Or so I thought. Now, as I stood among mourners, invisible to the woman who had just revealed her true feelings, I felt a strange numbness spread through me. My son's wife, the woman who had shared his bed, his home, his life, she saw me as nothing but a burden to be discarded. I wanted to confront her, to scream at her, but I couldn't move. I was too stunned, too crushed by this new betrayal layered atop the raw wound of Jason's death. I don't know how long I stood there, but eventually I managed to pull myself away. The rest of the funeral passed in a blur, but Vanessa's words echoed in my mind, growing louder with each passing moment. She wasn't just mourning my son. She was plotting my downfall. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. The paralysis of grief gave way to something else, a spark of anger, of determination. I had already lost my child, but I wasn't going to let Vanessa throw me aside like I was nothing. This wasn't just about grieving anymore. It was about survival. That day, amid the worst pain I'd ever known, my fight began. The reading of Jason's will was scheduled for the following week. I arrived at his attorney's office downtown, my hands trembling as I sat in the sleek conference room. The reality of his absence pressed on me from all sides, making it difficult to breathe. Benjamin Lawson, Jason's lawyer for the past decade, greeted me with a gentle handshake. Mrs. Wright, I'm so sorry for your loss. Jason was an extraordinary man. I nodded, unable to speak. Around the table sat a few distant relatives, some executives from Jason's company, and Vanessa, dressed impeccably in black, her eyes red and puffy. She offered me a sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. The reading began, and I tried to focus on Benjamin's words, but my mind kept drifting. None of this mattered. No amount of money or property could bring Jason back. Then I heard something that jolted me back to attention. And to my mother, Eleanor Wright, I leave not only the sum of $15 million, but also name her as the executor of my estate and controlling shareholder of Wright Technologies. The room went silent. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My son, the brilliant businessman who had built an empire from nothing, had entrusted me, his simple working-class mother, to oversee everything he had built. I glanced at Vanessa, expecting to see shock or disappointment. Instead, what I saw chilled me to the bone. For just a fraction of a second, her carefully composed mask slipped, revealing something dark and dangerous beneath. Her jaw tightened, her fingers clutching her purse with white knuckles. The lawyer continued reading, detailing Vanessa's portion. A sizable sum by any standard, but clearly less than she had anticipated. She would receive their Malibu beach house and $5 million, with an additional percentage of company profits for the next decade. Is this some kind of joke? Vanessa's voice cut through the room, her tone sharp enough to make everyone look up. There must be a mistake. Benjamin adjusted his glasses. I assure you, Mrs. Wright, these were Jason's explicit instructions. The will was updated just 6 months ago. Vanessa's face flushed, but she quickly regained her composure, settling back into her chair with a tight smile. Of course. I'm just surprised. He never mentioned any of this to me. I sat there, stunned by both Jason's decision and Vanessa's reaction. Why had my son made this choice? And why was Vanessa so shocked? Had she expected to receive everything? As the meeting concluded, Vanessa approached me, placing a manicured hand on my arm. Eleanor, this must be overwhelming for you. Why don't you let me help? I understand Jason's business. I've been by his side for years. Her touch felt like ice against my skin. Behind her sympathetic words, I could sense calculation, assessment. She was already planning her next move. Thank you, Vanessa, but I'll manage, I said quietly, pulling away from her. Her smile faltered for just a second. Of course. But remember, I'm here for you. We're family after all. Family, the word hung in the air between us, hollow and false. As I walked out of the office into the bright California sunshine, I felt the weight of what lay ahead. I wasn't just grieving anymore. I was being pulled into a battle I never asked for, against an opponent I was only beginning to understand. That night, as I sat alone in my small Oakland apartment, surrounded by photos of Jason throughout the years, I tried to make sense of everything. Why had he left me in charge? Did he somehow know that Vanessa couldn't be trusted? Had there been problems in their marriage I hadn't seen? I picked up a photo of Jason at his company launch party, his arm around Vanessa, both of them smiling brilliantly for the camera. They looked perfect together, but appearances could be deceiving. I was learning that the hard way. As I stared at Vanessa's beautiful face, I remembered her words at the funeral, the cold calculation in her eyes at the will reading. This wasn't over. She wanted what Jason had built, and she wouldn't let me stand in her way. For the first time since Jason's death, I felt something beyond grief taking root inside me, determination. I might be a 63-year-old former office manager who knew nothing about running a tech company, but I was also a mother who had raised a son alone in some of Chicago's toughest neighborhoods. I'd fought for him his entire life. Now I would fight for his legacy, and I wouldn't let Vanessa win. Chapter 2. The Whispers. The days after the will reading blurred together as I tried to navigate my new reality. Jason's company, Wright Technologies, was a sprawling operation with over 300 employees and offices in 4 cities. As executor and majority shareholder, I was suddenly responsible for decisions that would affect countless lives. I spent my mornings in meetings with executives who spoke a language of IPOs and venture capital that might as well have been Greek to me. My afternoons were devoted to reviewing documents with Benjamin, trying to understand the empire my son had built. At night, I'd collapse into bed, exhausted but unable to sleep, my mind racing with all I needed to learn. Throughout it all, Vanessa maintained her performance as the grieving widow. She appeared at the company offices regularly, dressed in elegant black attire, offering quiet support and gentle suggestions. To everyone else, she was the picture of dignity and grace. But I began to notice things, small things at first. The way certain employees would defer to her rather than me. How conversations would stop when I entered a room. The slight condescension in her tone when she explained something I'd already understood. "Eleanor, don't worry about the quarterly projections," she'd say, placing a hand on my shoulder in front of the board members. "It's all very complicated. Just leave it to the team." Each interaction was a subtle undermining of my authority, a gentle suggestion that perhaps I wasn't up to the task. And it was working. I could see the doubt in people's eyes, the unspoken question, why had Jason left this company in the hands of his elderly mother instead of his capable wife? I began to wonder the same thing myself. Until the day I overheard a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. I was working late at the company headquarters, reviewing financial reports in what had been Jason's office. Most of the staff had gone home, the building quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning. I had stepped out to get coffee from the break room when I heard voices coming from the conference room down the hall. "She's completely out of her depth," Vanessa's voice, no longer maintaining its sympathetic tone. "She has no idea what she's doing." "The board is getting concerned," a male voice responded, Marcus Chen, one of the company's senior VPs. "The stock is already down 5% since the announcement. It's only going to get worse," Vanessa said. "Eleanor can barely use a smartphone, let alone understand a tech company. This decision of Jason's, it makes no sense." "Unless he wasn't thinking clearly," Marcus suggested. "You mentioned he'd been under a lot of stress before the accident." There was a pause. "Yes," Vanessa's voice softened. "He hadn't been himself for months. Distant, paranoid. I tried to get him to see someone, but you know how stubborn he was." My heart pounded in my chest. What was she implying? "Is there anything that can be done?" Marcus asked. "Legally, I mean." Another pause, longer this time. "Perhaps, if Eleanor were found to be incapable of handling these responsibilities, the court might intervene." "Incapable how?" "She's 63, Marcus. Living alone, dealing with unimaginable grief. Who knows what toll that takes on someone's mental state? On their decision-making abilities?" I pressed myself against the wall, my coffee forgotten. The blood rushed in my ears as the implications of her words became clear. Vanessa wasn't just trying to undermine me, she was laying the groundwork to have me declared incompetent. "I don't know, Vanessa," Marcus sounded hesitant. "That seems extreme." "What's extreme is watching everything Jason built fall apart because his mother can't tell the difference between code and the Kindle she reads her romance novels on," Vanessa snapped. "I'm not going to let that happen." I'd heard enough. I slipped back to Jason's office, my mind racing. This wasn't just office politics or a grieving widow's resentment. This was calculated, deliberate. Vanessa was planning to take everything, the company, Jason's legacy, my dignity, and she was willing to destroy me to do it. That night, I couldn't sleep. Vanessa's words played over and over in my mind. I'd known she resented me, but this was something else entirely. She was portraying me as mentally unstable, planting seeds of doubt among the company leadership. I pulled out my laptop, the one Jason had insisted on buying me last Christmas, and began searching. How to prove mental competency, ageism in business, executor responsibilities in California. By morning, I had pages of notes and a growing sense of what I was up against. This wasn't a fair fight. Vanessa had connections, resources, and years of building relationships at the company. I was an outsider, the nice mom who showed up at company picnics, nothing more. But I had one thing Vanessa didn't. I knew what she was planning. And knowledge, as Jason always said, was power. I made 3 decisions that morning. First, I needed allies, people who had known Jason well and whom I could trust. Second, I needed to understand the business quickly, well enough to demonstrate my competence beyond any doubt. And third, I needed to watch Vanessa very, very carefully. I started with Daniel Morgan, Jason's oldest friend and the company's chief technology officer. He'd been there from the beginning, working alongside my son in a cramped apartment before they had investors or offices. If anyone knew Jason's true wishes for the company, it would be Daniel. We met for coffee at a small shop away from the office. Daniel looked tired, his usually well-kept beard now slightly unkempt, dark circles under his eyes. "Thanks for meeting me," I said as we sat in a quiet corner. "How are you holding up?" Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "Not great, to be honest. The company feels different without him. Everything does." I know, I sighed. Daniel, I need to ask you something important. Did Jason ever talk to you about his plans for the company? About who he wanted to take over if something happened to him? Daniel looked surprised. He mentioned updating his will a while back, but we didn't get into specifics. Why? Is something wrong? I hesitated, then decided on honesty. I think Vanessa expected to be left in charge. She's not happy with Jason's decision, and I'm worried about what she might do. Daniel's expression darkened. What kind of do? She's suggesting to people that I'm not mentally capable of handling the responsibility, that Jason wasn't thinking clearly when he made me executor. Daniel set down his coffee cup with more force than necessary. That's ridiculous! Jason knew exactly what he was doing, always. Did they have problems? I asked quietly. Jason and Vanessa? He never said anything to me, but Daniel looked uncomfortable. It wasn't my place to get involved. Daniel, please. I need to understand what's happening. He sighed heavily. They put on a good show in public, but things hadn't been great for a while. Jason never gave details, but about 8 months ago, he started asking a lot of questions about the company structure, about ways to protect the intellectual property. Protect it from what? He didn't say specifically, but he was concerned, and he was spending a lot of time with lawyers. My mind raced. 6 months ago is when he updated his will. Daniel nodded slowly. That timing doesn't seem coincidental. We talked for another hour, Daniel filling me in on company matters, explaining the current projects and challenges. As we were about to leave, he put a hand on my arm. Eleanor, be careful. Vanessa? She's always been ambitious, and she knows the business world in ways you don't. I'm learning quickly, I said. I don't doubt that. You raised Jason after all. He smiled slightly. But watch your back. And if you need anything at all, call me. As I walked back to my car, I felt both stronger and more frightened than before. I had an ally in Daniel, and possibly some insight into why Jason had made his decisions. But Vanessa's plans were already in motion, and I was still catching up. That evening, as I pulled into the driveway of my rental house, I'd moved from Oakland to Palo Alto to be closer to the company, I noticed a car I didn't recognize parked across the street. A man sat in the driver's seat, apparently focused on his phone. I thought nothing of it until I saw the same car, with the same man, outside the coffee shop the next morning, and again near the company offices that afternoon. Someone was watching me, and I had little doubt who had ordered the surveillance. The game had begun in earnest. Vanessa was gathering ammunition, looking for any mistake, any sign of weakness she could use against me. I needed to be perfect, composed, competent, and completely in control at all times. As I prepared for bed that night, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Be careful what you say to Daniel Morgan. Loyalty can be bought. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling slightly. It wasn't enough for Vanessa to watch me. She wanted me to know I was being watched. She wanted me to feel isolated, paranoid. Instead of fear, I felt a surge of determination. If Vanessa thought intimidation would make me back down, she didn't know me at all. I hadn't fought my way through poverty and single motherhood to be bullied now. I deleted the message and turned off my phone. Tomorrow would be another day in this silent war, and I needed to be rested. Because one thing was becoming increasingly clear. Vanessa wasn't just after Jason's money or his company. She wanted me gone, completely. And I was beginning to wonder just how far she would go to make that happen. Chapter 3. The Trap. The morning started like any other in my new role. Early alarm, strong coffee, and a quick review of emails before heading to the office. But as I backed my car out of the garage, I immediately sensed something was wrong. The steering felt loose, unresponsive. When I tapped the brakes at the end of the driveway, the pedal went unnaturally soft beneath my foot. A cold prickle of fear ran up my spine. I eased the car back into the garage and called a local mechanic. Better safe than sorry. 3 hours later, I stood in the repair shop, watching Mike Sanders, a gruff man in his 50s, emerge from beneath my car. His expression was grave. Mrs. Right, these brake lines didn't fail by accident, he said, wiping his hands on a rag. Someone tampered with them. See this clean cut? That's deliberate. The world seemed to tilt around me. You're saying someone wanted my brakes to fail? Mike nodded grimly. If you'd hit the highway? At speed? You wouldn't be standing here talking to me. I felt sick. I'd suspected Vanessa was plotting against me, but this? This was attempted murder. Should I call the police? I asked, my voice barely steady. Mike hesitated. You could, but without cameras or witnesses. It'll be your word against whoever did this. And brake lines can be cut in under 30 seconds. He was right. I had no proof, just suspicion. And accusing my son's widow of trying to kill me without evidence would make me look exactly like what Vanessa wanted everyone to believe. An unstable, paranoid old woman. "Fix the car, please," I said quietly. "And don't mention this to anyone." Mike gave me a long look. "Be careful, Mrs. Wright. Whoever did this won't be happy it failed." I nodded, then called an Uber to take me to the office. As we drove, I stared out the window, my mind racing. This wasn't just a corporate power struggle anymore. Someone, and I had little doubt who, had tried to kill me. I needed help, but who could I trust? The police might dismiss me. Most of Jason's colleagues barely knew me. And now I questioned whether even Daniel was truly on my side. Then it hit me. Jason wouldn't have left me in this position without resources. He was always 10 steps ahead, always planning for contingencies. There had to be something, someone. Benjamin Lawson, Jason's lawyer, had known my son for years, long before Vanessa entered the picture. If Jason had suspected trouble, Benjamin might know more than he'd revealed. I redirected the Uber to Benjamin's downtown office. He looked surprised when his secretary showed me in, but quickly cleared his schedule. "Mrs. Wright, what can I do for you?" he asked, gesturing for me to sit. I decided honesty was my only option. "Someone tampered with my car this morning." "Cut the brake lines!" Benjamin's professional composure cracked. "My God, are you all right?" "I'm fine. I noticed something was wrong before I got on the road." I leaned forward. "Benjamin, I think Vanessa might be behind it." He didn't look as shocked as I expected. Instead, he removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "I was afraid something like this might happen." My heart skipped. "What do you mean?" Benjamin hesitated, then stood and walked to his filing cabinet. He unlocked a drawer and removed a sealed envelope. "Jason left this with me 6 months ago, with instructions to give it to you if anything happened to him or if you came to me with concerns about your safety." My hands trembled as I took the envelope. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten letter in Jason's familiar scrawl. "Mom, if you're reading this, either I'm gone or you've realized Vanessa isn't who she pretends to be. I hope it's neither, but I've learned to prepare for the worst. I married Vanessa believing I knew her. I was wrong. The woman I fell in love with doesn't exist. Behind the perfect smile is someone calculating, ruthless, and dangerous. I discovered this too late. By the time I realized who she really was, our lives were too entangled to simply walk away. I've been gathering evidence, preparing to leave her, but I have to be careful. Vanessa has connections, dangerous ones, that she's kept hidden from everyone. The USB contains everything I've found: financial records showing money transfers to offshore accounts, communications with people involved in illegal activities, and recordings of conversations that reveal her true nature. There's also a copy of my real will. The public one is different, designed to make Vanessa show her hand. "I've left you in charge because you're the only person I trust completely." My hope is that Vanessa accepts the terms and moves on, but I fear she won't. She's grown accustomed to the wealth, the status, the power. If you're reading this, be careful. Vanessa is more dangerous than she appears. Contact Detective James Sullivan at the SFPD. He's been helping me build a case discreetly. I love you, Mom. You taught me to stand up for what's right, no matter how hard. Now, I'm asking you to do the same, one last time. Jason, I read the letter twice, tears blurring my vision. Jason had known. All this time, he'd been living with someone he feared, someone he was planning to leave. And now I understood why the brake lines had been cut. Vanessa didn't just want control of the company. She wanted to eliminate the last obstacle between her and everything Jason had built. "Did you know what was on this?" I asked Benjamin, holding up the USB. He shook his head. "Jason only told me it was insurance. That if anything happened to him, it would protect you." I slipped the drive and letter back into the envelope. "Thank you, Benjamin. I need to go." "Where?" "Mrs. Wright. If what you're saying is true, you might not be safe." "I'm going to see Detective Sullivan," I said, standing up. "And then I'm going to figure out exactly what my son discovered about his wife." Benjamin looked concerned. "Let me arrange security for you, at least until we know the extent of the threat." I agreed. Not because I wanted protection, but because I needed time to review what was on the USB, to meet with the detective, to understand what I was up against. By that evening, I was set up in a hotel room under a different name, with a security guard posted outside. On my laptop, I began exploring the contents of the USB drive. What I found chilled me to the bone. Jason had been thorough. There were financial records showing Vanessa had been siphoning money from their joint accounts to offshore holdings. Emails between her and several men with criminal backgrounds. Background checks revealing her entire history was fabricated, even her name wasn't real. Most disturbing were the audio recordings. Jason had apparently placed recording devices in their home. In one, Vanessa spoke on the phone about him in a cold, calculating way. He's becoming suspicious. We may need to accelerate our timeline. In another, she argued with someone about money. I didn't marry him for $5 million. I married him for everything, and I'll get it one way or another. I listened for hours, my heart breaking anew with each revelation. My son had been living with a predator, someone who had targeted him for his wealth and was preparing to take everything. And then, in the final recording, dated just 3 days before the accident, I heard something that made my blood freeze. Vanessa speaking quietly into a phone. The breaks are the easiest. Make it look like an accident. Highway 101 near the Palo Alto exit. Friday morning. He always takes that route. The same highway where Jason had died. The same method someone had just tried to use on me. I sat back overwhelmed by the horrifying truth. Jason hadn't died in an accident. Vanessa had ordered his murder, and now she was trying to do the same to me. With shaking hands, I picked up my phone and called the number for Detective Sullivan that Jason had included in his letter. It was time to end this, not just for my sake, but for justice for my son. The detective answered on the third ring. Sullivan. Detective Sullivan, my name is Eleanor Wright. I'm Jason Wright's mother. I took a deep breath. My son was working with you before he died. I have evidence that his death wasn't an accident, and that my life is in danger too. There was a pause then. Mrs. Wright, I've been waiting for your call. How quickly can you come to the station? I'll be there in 30 minutes. As I gathered my things, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The grief and fear were still there, but now I had purpose. Jason had left me the tools I needed to finish what he'd started. He had trusted me to see this through. Vanessa had underestimated me from the beginning. She'd seen a grieving mother, an aging woman she could easily push aside. She was about to discover how wrong she'd been. Enjoying our stories? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any of our upcoming content. Now let's get back to our story. Chapter 4. The confrontation detective James Sullivan was not what I expected. In my mind, I'd pictured someone older, hardened by years on the force. Instead, I found myself sitting across from a man in his mid-30s with intelligent eyes and a methodical way of speaking that reminded me, painfully, of Jason. Your son contacted me about 3 months before his death, Sullivan explained, after I'd handed over the USB drive. He was careful, smart, said he needed to build a solid case before making any accusations. Against Vanessa? I asked. Sullivan nodded. And the people she's connected to? We're not just talking about a gold digger, Mrs. Right. Your daughter-in-law has ties to some dangerous individuals, people involved in everything from fraud to organized crime. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Are you saying Vanessa is part of some criminal organization? Not exactly. More like she's a specialist they use, a woman who targets wealthy men, integrates herself into their lives, and then, well, finds ways to access their assets. Sullivan's expression darkened. Jason was her biggest target yet. I thought of my brilliant, kind son. How proud he'd been to introduce Vanessa to me. How happy he'd seemed at their wedding. All a calculated lie. We were building a strong case, Sullivan continued. Jason had gathered substantial evidence, as you've seen. But we needed more time. He paused. Then the accident happened. It wasn't an accident, I said firmly. You heard the recording. Yes, but proving murder for hire isn't simple. The recording is damning, but a good lawyer could find ways to challenge its admissibility. We need more. A paper trail, the person she hired, something concrete to connect her directly to Jason's death. And the attempt on my life. The cut brake lines? Sullivan leaned forward. That gives us an opportunity. Vanessa doesn't know we're onto her. She thinks she's still in control. I understood where he was going. You want to set a trap? He nodded. If we move too soon with only circumstantial evidence, she could slip away. Or worse, her connections could help make the case disappear. He studied me carefully. But this would put you at risk. I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering. I met his gaze steadily. What do you need me to do? By the time I left the police station, we had a plan. It was dangerous, yes, but the alternative, letting Vanessa escape justice for killing my son, was unthinkable. For the next week, I played my part perfectly. I returned to work at Wright Technologies, showing no signs that anything had changed. I expressed concern about my car trouble, but never suggested foul play. I acted increasingly stressed, making small mistakes in meetings that would feed into Vanessa's narrative about my competence. All the while, Detective Sullivan's team was building the case. They traced the offshore accounts Jason had discovered, interviewed former associates of Vanessa's, and most importantly, identified the mechanic suspected of tampering with both Jason's car and mine. They found him working at a shop in Oakland. Under pressure, he gave up his contact, a middleman who arranged services for clients who didn't want to get their hands dirty. The middleman, facing serious charges himself, was quick to reveal text messages and payment records linking back to Vanessa. The trap was almost ready. Now we needed Vanessa to make one final, irrefutable move. On a Tuesday morning, I called Daniel Morgan and asked to meet privately. At a small cafe with police officers discreetly stationed nearby, I told him I'd made a decision. "I'm stepping down as executor," I said loudly enough for anyone nearby to hear. "This is all too much. Next week, I'm going to formally request that the court appoint Vanessa to take over." "She knows the business better anyway." Daniel looked genuinely shocked. "Eleanor, are you sure? That's not what Jason wanted." "Jason isn't here," I said, my voice breaking authentically. "And I can't do this anymore. I'm going to the lake house this weekend to think everything through. I'll file the paperwork on Monday." The lake house, a small property Jason had purchased years ago in Clear Lake, about 2 hours north of San Francisco. Isolated, rarely visited, the perfect place for an accident to befall an elderly woman who had changed her mind about a multi-million-dollar company. As expected, Daniel called Vanessa immediately after our meeting. By that evening, my security team, now undercover police officers, reported unusual activity. Someone had accessed the lake house, staying for approximately 1 hour before leaving. "She took the bait," Sullivan confirmed when I called him. "We found evidence of tampering with the deck railing. If you leaned on it, I'd fall into the rocky shoreline below," I finished. Not subtle, is it? People like Vanessa get overconfident. They've gotten away with so much for so long, they start to believe they're untouchable. He paused. "Are you sure you want to go through with this? We could arrest her now with what we have, and risk her walking free on some technicality." "No," I took a deep breath. "We finish this. For Jason." That Friday afternoon, I made a show of packing my car for the weekend, making sure Vanessa's surveillance saw me leave. The drive to Clear Lake was tense, even with an unmarked police car following at a distance. The lake house looked exactly as it always had, a modest A-frame cabin perched on a bluff overlooking the water. In the fading light, it seemed peaceful, belying the danger I knew waited inside. Detective Sullivan called as I pulled into the driveway. "We're in position. Remember, don't go near the back deck until we give the signal. And wear the wire at all times." I assured him I would be careful and ended the call. Then I waited. Vanessa arrived just after 9 p.m., her headlights off as she coasted to a stop behind some trees near the property. If I hadn't been watching for her, I might not have noticed her approach. I moved to the living room, positioning myself where she would see me through the windows. I made a show of pouring a glass of wine, reviewing papers, all the while keeping away from the compromised deck as instructed. The knock, when it came, startled me despite my anticipation. I opened the door to find Vanessa standing there, a concerned smile on her face. She looked perfect as always. Designer jeans, cashmere sweater, not a hair out of place. "Eleanor!" "I was in the area and thought I'd check on you," she said, the lie flowing effortlessly from her lips. "Daniel mentioned you were coming up here. Are you okay?" I feigned surprise. "Vanessa, this is unexpected. May I come in? It's getting chilly out here." I stepped aside, acutely aware of the wire beneath my sweater and the police officers watching from the darkness. Vanessa walked in, her eyes scanning the room quickly, taking in the wine, the papers, my overnight bag. "It's nice here," she said, moving further into the cabin. "Jason loved this place, didn't he? Though he always said the deck needed work." My heart pounded as she casually moved toward the back of the house. I needed to keep her talking, to get her to reveal her intentions. "I've been thinking about the company," I said, following her but keeping my distance. "About Jason's decision to put me in charge." Vanessa turned, her expression softening with practiced sympathy. "It's a lot of responsibility. Too much, really, for someone who should be focused on grieving." "That's what I've realized," I replied, watching her carefully. "I'm not cut out for this. The business world, the pressure, it's not for me." Something flashed in her eyes, triumph quickly masked. "You know, Eleanor, no one would blame you for stepping down. Jason wouldn't want you to suffer like this." "That's what I was thinking. That maybe you should take over." Vanessa tried to hide her smile, but I saw the corner of her mouth twitch upward. "If that's what you think is best. For Jason's legacy. Would you like to discuss it outside?" I gestured toward the back deck. The view of the lake is beautiful at night. She nodded eagerly. Some fresh air would be nice. I led her toward the back door, my pulse racing. This was the moment Sullivan had warned me about. I needed to get her to incriminate herself without putting myself in danger. Just before reaching the door, I stopped. Actually, before we go out, I should ask you something. Something that's been bothering me since Jason died. Vanessa's smile fixed in place. Of course. Anything. I took a deep breath. Did you kill my son? The question hung in the air between us. For a split second, Vanessa's mask slipped completely. Her eyes went cold, her posture rigid. Then, just as quickly, the facade was back. Eleanor, she said with a nervous laugh, grief can make us think terrible things. You're not well. I'm perfectly well, I replied. And I have the recordings Jason made. I know what you did to his brake lines. Just like you did to mine last week. All pretense vanished from Vanessa's face. Her beauty hardened into something cruel and calculating. You have no idea what you're talking about, she said, her voice low. And even if you did, it would be your word against mine. The grieving, unstable mother-in-law making wild accusations. That might have worked before, I said, reaching into my pocket. But not anymore. I pulled out my phone and played one of the recordings. Vanessa's voice discussing Jason's route the day of his accident. Her face paled. Where did you get that? She demanded. Jason was smarter than you gave him credit for. He knew what you were. What you were planning. Vanessa's expression turned venomous. He was a fool. Brilliant with computers maybe, but blind when it came to people. Do you know how easy it was to make him fall in love with me? How easy it would have been to access everything without all this mess? Why kill him then? Why not just divorce him? Take your settlement? She laughed bitterly. A prenup that would give me practically nothing? No, I invested years in this. I deserved everything. And me? Why try to kill me? You were supposed to be a non-issue, she spat. A signature on some papers, nothing more. But Jason had to complicate things, making you executor. Her eyes narrowed. No matter. After your unfortunate accident this weekend, all the problems will be solved. There it was, the confession Sullivan needed, captured clearly on the wire I was wearing. You won't get away with this, Vanessa. She moved closer, all charm gone now. I already have. By the time they find your body at the bottom of that cliff, I'll be executing the contingency plan. New identity, new country. Your son's money will keep me very comfortable. Was it worth it? I asked quietly. Killing Jason? Destroying the one person who truly loved you? Something flickered in her eyes. Not remorse exactly, but perhaps a moment of recognition of what she'd thrown away. Then it was gone. He never knew the real me, she said coldly. No one does. That's where you're wrong, I replied. I know exactly who you are now. Behind Vanessa, the back door opened. Detective Sullivan stepped in, flanked by 2 officers. Vanessa Wright, he said. You're under arrest for the murder of Jason Wright and the attempted murder of Eleanor Wright. Vanessa's face contorted with rage. She looked from Sullivan to me, realization dawning that she'd been trapped. You stupid old woman, she hissed as the officers moved towards her. You have no idea what you've done. I have people, powerful people, who won't let this stand. Save it for your attorney, Sullivan said, reading her rights as the officers handcuffed her. I watched in silence as they led her away, this beautiful, deadly woman who had taken my son from me. I felt no satisfaction, no triumph, only a profound sadness for everything that had been lost. Detective Sullivan stayed behind briefly. You did well, he said gently. The confession was clear. With that and the evidence we've gathered, she won't see freedom for a very long time. I nodded, suddenly exhausted. What about these powerful people she mentioned? We're already investigating her network. Jason's recordings have given us leads we never had before. He squeezed my shoulder. It's over, Mrs. Wright. You're safe now. But as I stood alone in the cabin after everyone had left, I knew it wasn't really over. Justice had been served, yes, but my son was still gone. The emptiness, the grief, those remained. I walked out onto the back porch, now made safe by the police, and looked out at the moonlight reflecting on the lake's surface. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called into the night. We did it, Jason, I whispered to the stars above. She can't hurt anyone else now. The cool night air carried no response, but for the first time since my son's death, I felt a measure of peace. The fight was over. Now the healing could begin. Chapter 5. The Legacy. The trial of Vanessa Wright dominated headlines for months. The beautiful widow, the tech millionaire's murder, the grieving mother who brought down a killer, it had all the elements of a sensational story. Reporters camped outside my house, called constantly, showed up at Wright Technologies hoping for a quote or a photograph. I gave them nothing. This wasn't about publicity or vengeance. It was about justice for my son. The evidence against Vanessa was overwhelming. Beyond Jason's recordings and her confession at the lake house, Detective Sullivan's team uncovered a trail of destruction that spanned years. 3 previous marriages to wealthy men, all ending with suspicious accidents or sudden illnesses. Offshore accounts holding millions. A network of accomplices who helped her create new identities, target victims, and disappear when necessary. Most damning was the testimony of the mechanic who had sabotaged both Jason's car and mine. Facing life in prison himself, he detailed how Vanessa had arranged everything, how coldly she had planned my son's murder. Throughout the trial, Vanessa maintained her composure, playing the role of the wrongfully accused widow with the same skill she had once played the loving wife. But the mask slipped during cross-examination when the prosecutor played Jason's recordings. For just a moment, the courtroom glimpsed the true Vanessa, cold, calculating, enraged at being outsmarted by the man she had murdered. The jury deliberated for less than 5 hours before returning with a guilty verdict on all counts. The judge sentenced her to life without parole, plus additional years for the attempt on my life. As Vanessa was led from the courtroom, she looked at me one last time, her beautiful face twisted with hatred. I held her gaze steadily, refusing to look away. She had taken my son, but she hadn't broken me. She never would. The aftermath of the trial brought unexpected challenges. Wright Technologies had suffered during the months of uncertainty and negative publicity. Key employees had left, investors had grown nervous, and competitors had seized the opportunity to poach talent and clients. As executor and majority shareholder, the responsibility for saving Jason's company fell to me, a responsibility I was no longer sure I wanted. In the quiet moments after justice had been served, I found myself questioning everything. What was I doing running a tech company at 63? Was this really what Jason would have wanted for me? One evening, as I sat in my son's office reviewing quarterly reports, Daniel Morgan knocked on the door. "Got a minute?" he asked, looking more relaxed than I'd seen him since before Jason's death. "Of course," I gestured to the chair across from me. "What's up?" Daniel sat studying me for a moment. "You look tired, Eleanor." "I am tired," I admitted. "All of this, the company, the trial, trying to figure out what happens next. It's exhausting." "That's actually why I wanted to talk to you." He leaned forward. "I've been thinking about what Jason really wanted. Not just for the company, but for you." "What do you mean?" "He wouldn't have wanted you to sacrifice your life for Wright Technologies. Making you executor. That was his way of protecting his legacy from Vanessa, not tying you to a job you never asked for." I sighed, feeling the truth of his words. "But I can't just abandon the company." "There are hundreds of employees counting on these jobs. Jason built something important here." "No one's suggesting abandonment," Daniel said. "But there are other ways to honor Jason's legacy while still living your own life." He outlined a plan. Restructuring the company leadership, bringing in experienced executives for day-to-day operations, while I remained as chairwoman of the board. I would have oversight without the burden of daily management. The company would create a foundation in Jason's name, focused on helping young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds, kids like Jason had once been. "You'd still be protecting what he built," Daniel explained, "but you'd also have freedom to grieve properly, to decide what you want the next chapter of your life to look like." As he spoke, I felt something loosen in my chest, a tension I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. The idea of stepping back while still honoring Jason's vision felt right in a way that struggling to run the company never had. "I think Jason would have liked that plan," I said finally. "Especially the foundation part," Daniel smiled. "He would have. He never forgot where he came from, how hard you worked to give him opportunities." Over the next few months, we implemented the changes. I appointed a new CEO, a brilliant woman who had worked with Jason from the early days and shared his vision. We established the Jason Wright Foundation with an initial endowment of $10 million. And slowly, Wright Technologies began to recover, emerging stronger and more focused than before. As for me, I found myself with something I hadn't had in decades, time to figure out what I wanted. I started small. I moved out of the rental in Palo Alto and bought a cozy house in Berkeley with a garden and a view of the bay. I joined a grief support group, finally allowing myself to process the trauma and loss without the distraction of corporate warfare or criminal trials. I reconnected with old friends, made new ones, and I began to heal. 1 year after Vanessa's conviction, I stood in the newly opened headquarters of the Jason Wright Foundation. Around me, 20 young people from disadvantaged neighborhoods were receiving their first grants, seed money to develop the tech ideas they'd previously had no way to pursue. A young woman approached me, her eyes bright with determination. Mrs. Wright? I just wanted to thank you. This grant? It's going to change my life. What's your project? I asked. An app that helps kids in foster care connect with educational resources, she explained. I aged out of the system myself last year. There's so much these kids need that they don't know how to access. As she spoke about her vision, I saw echoes of Jason, the same passion, the same desire to solve problems and help others. This was my son's true legacy, not the buildings or the stock price or the product lines. It was inspiring the next generation to create, to innovate, to make the world better. Later that evening, as I sat in my garden watching the sunset over the bay, I thought about the journey of the past 2 years, the unimaginable loss, the betrayal and danger, the fight for justice. I had lost my son, and nothing could ever fill that void completely. But in fighting for his legacy, I had discovered strengths I never knew I possessed. I had faced evil and emerged not unscathed but unbroken. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Sullivan, who had become a friend through the ordeal we'd shared. Saw the foundation launch on the news. Jason would be proud. So am I smiled, typing back a thank you. Sullivan was right. Jason would be proud, not just of what his company had become, but of what I had become. Not the grieving mother who could be easily dismissed, not the burden Vanessa had seen, but a woman of resilience and purpose. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Tomorrow would bring foundation meetings, board decisions, perhaps a lunch with one of my new friends. Life, continuing in ways I never could have imagined. I miss you every day, I whispered to the evening sky, to my son who wasn't there to hear. But I'm okay, I promise. And for the first time in a very long time, I truly was. Chapter 6. The Revelation. 2 years after Vanessa's conviction, I received an unexpected call from Detective Sullivan. Mrs. Wright, do you have time to meet today? There's something you should know. His tone sent a chill through me. Is it about Vanessa? Has something happened? Not exactly. It's about Jason's case. Some new information has come to light. We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe near my home. Sullivan arrived looking troubled, a thick folder tucked under his arm. What is it? I asked after we'd ordered coffee. You're making me nervous. Sullivan sighed. We've been continuing to investigate Vanessa's network, following money trails, communications, and we found something unexpected. He opened the folder and slid a photograph across the table. It showed Jason, my Jason, sitting at an outdoor cafe with a man I didn't recognize. This was taken 3 weeks before your son's death, Sullivan explained. The other man is Victor Driscoll. He's a former intelligence operative who now works private security. I stared at the photo, confused. I don't understand. What does this have to do with Vanessa? We interviewed Driscoll last week. He was reluctant to talk, but eventually he confirmed that Jason hired him for a very specific purpose. Sullivan paused. Your son knew someone was trying to kill him, Eleanor. He knew, and he was taking steps to protect himself. My coffee sat untouched, growing cold. If he knew, why didn't he go to the police sooner? Why didn't he tell me? According to Driscoll, Jason suspected Vanessa was working with someone inside the company. Someone with access to his schedule, his communications. He couldn't risk alerting them. Sullivan hesitated. And he was worried about your safety. He thought the less you knew, the safer you'd be. I closed my eyes briefly, picturing my son carrying this terrible knowledge alone, trying to protect me even as his own life was in danger. There's more, Sullivan continued. Driscoll says Jason had uncovered something bigger than just Vanessa's plans. Something about the company's new security software, vulnerabilities that were being deliberately built in, backdoors that would allow access to client systems. Corporate espionage? I asked. Sullivan nodded. And potentially worse, some of their clients are government agencies, defense contractors. The implications were serious. And Vanessa was involved in this? Yes, but not alone. She was working with someone high up in the company. Jason was close to figuring out who, when they killed him, I finished. Sullivan pushed another document toward me, a partial email Jason had sent to Driscoll the day before his death. It mentioned a meeting, evidence he'd secured, and a name that had been redacted. "We think Jason was planning to expose everything the next day," Sullivan said quietly. "That's why they couldn't wait any longer." My mind raced, piecing together implications. The sabotaged brakes. That was never just Vanessa's plan, was it? She had help. We believe so. Someone who stood to lose everything if Jason went public. "Do you know who?" Sullivan's expression turned grim. "We have a strong suspicion, but we need more evidence. That's partly why I'm here." After we arrested Vanessa, searches of the company files stopped. People relaxed. Now we're seeing activity again. Someone looking for anything Jason might have hidden. A horrible thought occurred to me. The new CEO, is she in danger? "We're watching the situation closely," Sullivan assured me. "But yes, potentially. Anyone who gets too close to what Jason discovered could be at risk." I sat back, overwhelmed. Just when I'd thought the nightmare was over, it was expanding, revealing new depths of betrayal and danger. "What happens now?" I asked. "We continue our investigation carefully. But I wanted you to know." "And—" Sullivan hesitated. "I need to ask if Jason might have hidden anything else. Something he didn't include on the USB he left with his lawyer. Something only you would know about." I thought hard, trying to recall any unusual comments, any significant moments from our last conversations. Nothing stood out except the lake house, I said suddenly. The last time we were there together, about a month before he died, Jason spent hours alone in the boathouse. Said he was fixing the old rowboat, but when I went down later, the boat hadn't been touched. Sullivan's eyes sharpened. "Would you be willing to go back there? Today?" The drive to Clear Lake was tense. Memories of my last visit, the trap for Vanessa, vivid in my mind. But this time I wasn't frightened. I was driven by a new purpose, completing what Jason had started, exposing whoever had helped plan his murder. The boathouse was a simple structure at the water's edge, weathered by years of sun and rain. Inside, an old rowboat rested on sawhorses collecting dust. Nothing seemed unusual or out of place. Sullivan began a methodical search, examining walls, floorboards, ceiling beams. I watched, wondering if we were chasing ghosts. Then I remembered something. A game Jason and I used to play when he was small. We'd leave secret messages for each other in hiding spots around our apartment, under the third floorboard from the wall, inside the hollow leg of his desk chair, behind the loose brick in the fireplace. I moved to the far corner of the boathouse, counting floorboards from the wall. 1, 2, 3. I knelt and pressed on the edge of the board. It gave slightly. "Detective," I called. "I think I found something." Sullivan hurried over as I pried up the board. Beneath it was a small, waterproof case, the kind photographers use to protect equipment. Inside was a hard drive, carefully sealed in plastic, and a handwritten note. "If you're finding this, Mum, I'm probably gone. Everything is here, the evidence, the names, all of it. I'm sorry for putting this burden on you. I love you." Jay Sullivan carefully took the hard drive. "This could be exactly what we need." The contents of the hard drive proved explosive. Jason had documented everything: the security vulnerabilities, communications with the buyers, a foreign intelligence service, and most importantly, the internal conspiracy. The mastermind wasn't some shadowy executive I barely knew. It was Marcus Chen, the same senior VP who had been in that conference room with Vanessa, questioning my competence. The same man who had worked closely with Jason for years, who had attended his wedding, who had hugged me at his funeral. The betrayal cut deep, but it also made tragic sense. Marcus had been the perfect accomplice for Vanessa. He had intimate knowledge of the company, access to Jason's schedule, and everything to lose if the security breaches were discovered. Sullivan's team moved quickly, arresting Marcus before he could flee or destroy additional evidence. Unlike Vanessa, he broke almost immediately under questioning, confirming everything and revealing details even Jason hadn't discovered. The full story emerged in fragments. Marcus had been approached by foreign agents 3 years earlier, offered millions to build backdoors into Wright Technologies' security systems. At first, he'd refused, but financial troubles and greed eventually won out. When he met Vanessa at a company event, he recognized something kindred in her: ambition unconstrained by morality. They began working together, planning how to maximize their gains. When Jason started noticing discrepancies in the code, asking uncomfortable questions, they realized he was becoming dangerous. Vanessa suggested the accident as the cleanest solution. She would inherit his shares, Marcus would continue his work unimpeded, and both would profit enormously. They hadn't counted on Jason's foresight. his careful documentation, or his decision to make me executor of his estate. And they certainly hadn't expected me to fight back as I had. As the case against Marcus proceeded through the justice system, I found myself facing reporters once again, explaining a new chapter in a story I had thought was finished. But this time was different. This time, I wasn't just the grieving mother or the woman who had escaped murder. I was completing my son's work, honoring not just his memory but his courage. On a crisp autumn day, nearly 3 years after Jason's death, I stood at his grave with a small bouquet of his favorite flowers, simple daisies, nothing fancy. "It's done," I told him quietly. "All of it. Marcus was sentenced yesterday. 20 years, no possibility of parole before 15. The company is secure. Your team has rebuilt the security software from the ground up." A gentle breeze stirred the leaves of the maple tree overhead, sending a shower of red and gold drifting down around me. "The foundation is doing amazing work," I continued. 35 grants this year. You should see these kids, Jason. They remind me so much of you." I placed the flowers at the base of his headstone, brushing away a few fallen leaves. "I miss you every day. But I want you to know, I'm not just surviving anymore. I'm living, building something new from what you left behind." As I walked back to my car, I felt a sense of completion I hadn't expected to find. The pain of losing Jason would never fully disappear, but it had transformed into something I could carry without being crushed by its weight. Vanessa and Marcus had seen me as an obstacle, a nuisance, an aging woman they could easily push aside in their quest for wealth and power. They had underestimated me catastrophically. Not because I was particularly clever or strong, but because they had failed to understand the most fundamental truth about me. I was a mother, and there is nothing more dangerous than a mother fighting for justice for her child. In the end, that was Jason's most powerful legacy, not the company or the foundation, or even the evidence that brought down his killers. His legacy was the love between us, a bond that even death couldn't break, a bond that had given me the strength to fight when fighting seemed impossible. As I drove away from the cemetery, the autumn sun warm on my face, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. Jason was gone, but the light he had brought into the world continued to shine. Through the lives touched by his foundation, through the company he had built with integrity, and through me, his mother, who had refused to let darkness win. Some battles leave you broken, but some forge you into something new, something stronger and more resilient than you ever imagined possible. This had been my battle, and though the cost had been unimaginably high, I had emerged not just a survivor, but a victor. In my grief, I had discovered my power. In my loss, I had found my purpose. And in the end, that was enough. Wow, what a story! Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any of our upcoming content.